So we're recording, and I want to say hey to Grievers and Groovers. And today on our show, I am interviewing Lisa Callahan, who is a life coach, and her company's called Transformation for Real. And she is a griever and a groover. So I thought she would be the perfect guest today. And I just wanted to know, Lisa, what is your good to go story?
Oh my gosh. Um, ugh, do we have enough time? I mean, my good to go story is, I'll try to truncate this. So you and I have known each other since we were 16, probably.
High school, yeah.
Right? Crazy. We moved to LA 3 years ago, and my husband Darren went out to a concert with you. You mentioned good to go. He came home and it like blew my head off. I was like, that is the most amazing idea I have ever heard of.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a good to go party with you.
Yep.
And it was, what I loved about it was so informative. At the time, my dad was sick. My mom was still perfect. And my mother-in-law also is sick. And both my dad and my mother-in-law have dementia. And so it was you talking us through the whole process of good to go. And specifically having these conversations, like they might not write it out, but if you have the conversations, that alone will help. Unfortunately for me, both in the last 6 months, 10 months, I lost both my parents. And it was, neither one of them filled up their good to go, even though they both bought them. They were, but
it's not uncommon.
No, I'm sure it's not. And I would say it in some ways didn't matter, because I had enough information from filling out my own,
right,
as well as having gone to the good to go party, that I had enough conversations with them each to know exactly what to do. And that made the grieving so much easier. My dad passed away in hospice. So based on conversations you and I had had together, when I walked in and Entertainment Tonight was playing, I was like, oh, hell no. I put the Beach Boys on because I thought he's never watched Entertainment Tonight in his life. Like, that made no sense.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second in your story, because one of the stories that I tell in our consultations and parties is the story about how my dad, when he was going through open heart surgery and he was recovering, he said that he called me and he said he was incredibly bored at the hospital. And I said, all you do is sit at home and watch TV anyway. Why are you bored at the hospital when you have cable TV? And he said, I don't like to watch TV when I'm sick. And I never knew this. And so when he had come to a good to go party and all those things, and then a year later, when he was hospitalized, I walked into his room and he was intubated, so he couldn't communicate, and they had The Price is Right on. And I just thought, first of all, who turned the TV on? And second of all, this must be driving him crazy. Yeah. And I, insisted that they turn it off. And then I learned about sonic wills. Like, what are the sounds that you want to listen to if you were on your deathbed? These are just hypothetical questions, and who knows if you can actually carry that out at the end. But I told that story. So that must have been a bug in your brain when you walked in and Entertainment Tonight, my dad.
Totally. You know what? And here's the thing. So that story, so much of what you told that night, that's what the parties to me are so crucial, because, the good to go package itself is phenomenal. But to have that conversation with you and get to hear why the things are in there that are in there.
Right.
And I know not all of it comes from your experience. You are also getting it from having conversation with other people, such as myself. And that one really stuck out to me. And I will say also, just as a side note to that, my dad was not responsive at all. And of course, being in hospice, right? And I'm sure same with your dad, that's kind of the default for hospitals, right? They figure nobody's in here. So in lieu of them being alone, let's put the TV on.
Right.
As I said, I turned it off. I put on music that I knew he loved, but because he didn't hear it. Maybe he did, but I doubt it.
I believe he did, because hearing is the last sense to go, but yes.
But what was
Never know.
he might have, although I felt like I was kind of keeping it over here, but it was comforting to me. Right. To sit there, because I spent the night in the room. And so and of course, there is death sounds for sure, so while I am hearing this from him, I'm also hearing some of his favorite music. I put on a 50s Spotify playlist, and then I moved it into a 70s Spotify playlist, and then ultimately had Steely Dan on, and it was just like, it was so comforting to me. And what's interesting is it didn't ruin those songs for me. I kind of feared that it would.
Right.
But it didn't. Now I hear Reeling in the Years, which is what I woke up to, and he was gone. And it's just kind of like, oh, that's Dad's song now,
Yeah.
So it's those little things that are not only for them, but are for you as well, which I think is and that's, to me, that is the essence of Good to Go. It's not just for you, it's for those you leave behind. And you won't be there to know how it affects them. But if you do all this stuff, it can't help but be helpful.
I know, it's crazy. And then, right before the pandemic, had everybody quarantined, you interviewed me for your video podcast as well. And at that point, your mom was alive, and it was just
she died 2 days later.
I mean, talk to me about that, so we have this interview, we talk about Good to Go, advanced planning, grief, all of those things you've experienced, because you're still grieving your dad, because it had only been 6 months, 5 months?
Yeah, it was it was just under 6 months between the two of them.
Right.
Yeah. And my mom was completely healthy. Now we don't know 100% whether she had COVID, because what happened was she went out for a walk and just collapsed and was gone. She had been around a lot of people because she had been working the primaries at the Board of Elections. So she had been around a ton, but long story short, it was early enough in COVID, we didn't get her tested. So we don't know, but it was beyond shocking. And part of my grief for her was that we had spent the last 3 years so focusing on my dad that I felt like, oh, it's finally Mom's time. She'd been so generous and so, had been there for me and my sister through all of this. And so, to me, it was like, okay, now Mom gets all of our attention. And can I cuss?
Of course you can. Yes. Cussing is encouraged.
Thank you. It was just so mind-blowing. And so again, it was different than Dad, right? We didn't have anything to do, but there were things we knew. Like, we didn't get an autopsy, which in some ways I wish we had, but we knew she wouldn't have wanted one. We went against her wishes from a standpoint of there was a bit of a funeral and a service, but it was because she died so suddenly. Nobody had the time like we did with my dad to say goodbye. Right. So it was sort of that Amy, my sister, and I having these conversations about, okay, well, we've got to do this for us, which she would totally be okay with, but we're not going to do this because she didn't want that, And so it was it was still like because we had been having these conversations with Dad, we had also been having these conversations with Mom. So there was a lot of stuff we knew. And she had done completely on her own. She had been very meticulous about writing out her will and assigning free to Amy and I and all that kind of stuff. But there was a few things that felt like they had slipped through the cracks. And again, it was just like, oh, if she had just done this.
I know. If I could just quickly ask her very quickly what her iPad lock code is.
Right. That was the big one, right? The phone. We were trying to find people to contact. And her phone was a thumbprint. And luckily, she also had an old iPad that didn't have that. So we were able to do all that. But yeah, I mean, my sister and I just maddening, little things like that we never would have thought to ask her, but that kind of stuff is in the Good to Go, which is amazing. And we just would have never in a million years thought to say, oh, by the way, Mom, what's your, and that's also one of those things you don't really, it's like you wouldn't ask that question because that does seem morbid, but if she had just filled it out.
I know. Well, that's why I tell people, I'm like, use me. if you want to use me as the, you know, neutral third party, I will yell at your parents and you yourself if you don't get this advanced planning done, because I wish there was some sort of study, some sort of actual clinical study done on grieving people who are grieving, but their loved one who died completed all of their advanced planning, and grieving people who are going through their grief having to, you know, face the death duties without any answers that they need. And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, I thought of you so many times. I mean, not only were you fantastic in reaching out to me, but I thought of how many things, you know, what prompted Good to Go to begin with, how many things you didn't know when your mom died suddenly, right? And I just thought, Amy and I are so lucky that she did a really great job. My dad didn't have a lot, which was our luck with him, was that he didn't have, you know, he had already moved into care and he didn't have debt and all that.
Yeah, once you move someone into care, that's kind of, you do all the death duties at that point for the most part, you know.
Very good point. Yeah, for sure. But there is still, you know, I then after both, I had done some of my packet, but I hadn't done all. Darren was really good at getting his done, because that's him. You know, it's hard. It is hard to sit down and write that out. I was able to do all the administrative pieces, right? The banks and all that. But when it gets to the part about writing out your decades,
the
like
soul interview, and the, you know,
I
it's
mean,
not just a history of your bills and logistics, it's a history of your joy, you know.
Yeah. And yet I really, you know, so I spent time writing all that down. It's funny because Darren actually typed his up because his handwriting's so bad. But there's a part of me that I said, you know, I write some of it because I mean, it's really, I love that I have my mom and dad's handwriting. And so I did write mine because I thought I want them to have my handwriting.
Yeah.
You know, so that is hard. And yet I know it will be helpful. I know, you know, it's fun to have those. I do know some things about my mom's past and to think about that stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know her favorite stuff.
And what do you know, our parents, I believe anyway, that they live on through us. And I was just wondering what you think you have gotten from your mom and your dad that lives on through you and kind of lives on through your kids.
So it's interesting because, and you and I've had this conversation before, and I still think about it on pretty regularly. There, with my mom in particular, and again, maybe it's because she left so suddenly. You know, my sister and I really grieved my dad over the course of a couple of years.
Sure.
So by the time he passed, it was the relief. You know, like he's at peace, we can relax.
Mm-hmm.
And since my mom went so fast, with her in particular, I just don't feel like she's gone. Almost to the point where I'm like, is there going to be this day of reckoning where it just hits me like a ton of bricks? And it might not. I mean, a good part of me is physically, I look like my mom. I think we joked about this. I have one hand that looks like my mom. This looks like my mom with these big fat knuckles. And one hand, my dad literally had this finger that was bent like this. So I literally had this idea of like, I can look at mom or I can look at dad.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. And it doesn't seem weird or anything.
No,
I love it. I love it.
And I just, there are times that I say something and I'm like, oh my God, that was totally mom. Or, you know, or when I have very little patience, that's totally my dad. Like every once in a while I'll say something and I was like, wow, that was Joe just straight up coming out of me. You know, the election was big for me, and in that my mom was working on the election. You know, she very, very, very much wanted a change in leadership. And so it was bittersweet.
Yeah.
I have her ashes, so I did take her with me.
I love it.
Which was, I did not expect. Charlotte actually was in the booth with me, and she held the ashes.
Your daughter, yeah.
Yeah, Charlotte, thank you, my daughter. And I cried so hard the entire time. And it was mostly that she couldn't do this, you know, that she didn't get to stick around. And then again, I posted the other day, Hall & Oates is her favorite band, and
Yes.
fireworks. I mean, immediately my sister texted me. She goes, "Oh my God, Hall & Oates." I'm like, I know.
Yes, I know. I mean, I've got goosebumps just you
I
telling me.
know.
I'm like, Hall & Oates. Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
Darren looked at me and was like, "Good Lord." I was like, I know, she's totally here. And I think that's, that's the thing too. My kids, Liam, my son, was saying on election day, like, I can't stop thinking about grandma. And so it's just, what's living on, I don't know that it's about living through me, as it's just, I just feel like they're both still here,
Yeah.
And so that has helped. I don't get me wrong, I absolutely have breakdowns, there's no question.
Of course.
But overall, it's the weirdest thing.
I know. Death is so
Weird,
big.
right?
So weird. I mean, I remember saying this to you as you just had gotten the news that your mom died. And I was just like, it's so weird. It's so big. It's so hard to get your mind wrapped around it. One day your parents are here and the next day they're not. And it just feels like, wait a minute. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's ever happened to anyone else before. It's like, why did nobody tell me that this is going to hurt this much?
You know what? That is a very good point, because, there's a lot of conversation around, there's things that women don't talk about, right? Around childbirth, around postpartum, around menopause.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's partial. I don't know so much. I mean, I'm sure there is some like shame around it. I don't know about our age. I feel like our generation, we don't have a lot of shame.
Yeah, I don't have any shame.
I'm like, I'm willing to talk about anything.
Exactly.
But I do think it's not so much shame as it's just like, you don't even think to talk about it, because you do think you're the only one going through it.
Right.
And even though logically, that's not true,
right.
you do want to sort of tuck in and
yes.
when you're going through it. And yet, again, that's why I think what you do is so important. And I'm not here to be blowing smoke up your butt. I really do just think like your work is so important. And why I love sharing it so much is because this is the time to have these conversations when we are healthy.
Yes,
when we
everything
are
is relaxed and
yes, exactly. And then those you will share this information, and somebody will go, "Oh, that's right, Lisa went through that.
Right.
I remember that."
Yes.
It's. I think too, for me, and so many people, unfortunately, are going through this. I think about the holidays, and yet the holidays wouldn't have been the same anyways. So this is. I'm sure I'll be sad over these holidays, but I think next year is going to be the kicker.
Yeah, like when things kind of return back to normal, that's when it's in the everyday, it's going to be, I think, even more, real. I mean, and I do think that, it's different for everybody. And I always say this, I respect everybody's grieving story. Everybody grieves differently. It's so individual.
Yes.
But it's good to be able to take a step back and kind of understand that other people have gone through this in history before and have gotten through it, And when I first experienced a death with my mom, that was the first big one. I dove into the internet. I wanted to talk to everybody who lost a mom. I wanted to figure out how they got through it. What did they do? I wanted to hear everybody's individual story. And that in turn really helped me. And not only did it help ease my grief, but it also kind of directed me into what I wanted to do to help others in their grief. But I wanted to ask you, it's such a tough individual thing, but what did you find helpful in your grief? What made you feel better or just able enough to get through that heavy moment?
That is a good question. I think the first thing that comes to me was, and I know this is a privilege, I had the flexibility to take a couple of weeks off.
Right.
I mean, I know there needs to be family leave on a whole bunch of levels, but if I had a typical corporate job, I might have had like 4 days.
Right.
able just by the nature of the work I do to take 2 full weeks, you know? And so my family was with me the first week, and then the second week, my sister and I were able to just like do the deep dive of going in and cleaning the house. And because we had that flexibility, we could do it until we were too tired, which might have been 3 hours, and then we could go home knowing we had more time, you know? So I think that time for sure. I'm also just a big proponent of having your feelings. And so if, you know, there are a lot of days where I feel very neutral. There are some days that I am happy. And there are some days that I wake up and I'm like, oh, this is going to be one of those days where I'm on the verge of tears all day and might cry at, you know, a commercial. You know, I probably seem right now like I'm fine because I'm laughing and happy.
Of course.
But, you know, who knows? Something could weirdly trigger me in the next 5 minutes. You know?
Well, that's so, yeah. And I wanted to ask you too, because I mean, I definitely found this just because I feel like I'm a happy, positive person by nature, you know, and I wanted to ask you this too, because you are a very happy, positive person by nature. And I found it so strange that friends who were close to me, who knew me, you know, best friends and other people didn't know how to handle me when I was sad and grieving. And even though I was sad and grieving, I wasn't, you know, laying on the floor and they had to drag me around the house or anything, you know, I mean, I was kind of like you are now. We're just talking and everything's okay. And then sometimes you talk about it and you get weepy, and sometimes you can't talk about it because you're so weepy. And then sometimes you can talk about it without even a tear, you know? And so what was the reaction to people around you? You know, a lot of people are uncomfortable sitting with pain or, you know, being around your friends when you can't fix their pain. And so I'm just wondering what your experience was, because people say, you're too happy to be grieving. And I'm just like, well, just because my mom died, it doesn't mean my sense of humor died too, or my entire personality that I've had all my life, you know?
Yeah, that's funny. That's no. So again, I might be in a unique situation, although lots of people, again, unfortunately aren't, in that because it was COVID, I wasn't around a lot of people.
Right.
So, you know, I think again, that was a blessing at the time that it was my family and my sister's family. We all stayed at my sister's house and we were pretty much just the 8 of us, you know, which I really needed for those 2 weeks. Is just this like core family that we all loved her. We were all grieving differently, and yet we all were understanding of each other's grief.
That's huge, because sometimes you're so grief stricken, you can't see past your own pain. You know, I definitely couldn't. And then I was just feeling like I wasn't getting my needs met. You know, I wasn't getting my grief validated. And then my mom's best friend put her arm around me and she was like, why do you expect other people to validate you? And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right.
Damn.
I know. Shablam! While I'm grieving. But it's true. It's just, it's so hard when you don't get that validation.
Well, and it's, you know, I would say my experience has been a little interesting in that also, I mean, maybe it's just our age. I mean, your mom died several years ago, so we were younger, but at this age, like I have a lot of friends whose parents have died.
Right.
And so, you know, my friends were able to sort of step up. One of the things, this is a tip I would highly recommend to anyone that I'd never thought of before, which is I had friends who reached out. And what's interesting is they didn't do this with dad, but they did it with mom. And I don't know if it's because of the suddenness of mom, but I had friends text me every day and just say, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. You don't have to respond.
Yes.
That was huge. And it is absolutely a practice of mine now. I have one girlfriend who just would send me a different color heart every day.
Oh.
I didn't respond. I didn't have, you know, and so I just recently had a girlfriend's dad pass. And that's what I was doing to her is I would just send and say, I'm just thinking about you. You don't have to respond.
Right.
Because there is that sense of like, oh, I got to say thank you. I've got to answer back. And in that instance, I really wasn't able to answer people back, you know? So that was really helpful. I had some people like feel like they dropped the ball and not reach out to me, but I didn't take it personally because, you know, I didn't feel like I just like, it was COVID. Everybody's going through something, right? So, you know, you get some grace there first off. And it was just probably one less thing I felt like I had to respond to, you know?
Right.
So again, I think I was lucky in that the people I reached out to they stepped up in the way I needed them to step up, but they're also lifelong friends who have also lost parents and that sort of thing. So that was helpful.
What do you, how have your thoughts on death and grief changed now that that your mom and dad, that you have experienced such two close deaths? You know, I mean, all of us have had our grandparents and things like that, but like, you know, what do you think, how has death and grief changed you, do you think? Or is it too early to tell?
You know, it might be too early. I would say what comes to me out of the gate is that I did survive it. I mean, again, mom and dad were so different. Dad's was a relief and a like, you know, grateful for him, grateful for my sister and I. You know, my son said when my sister called and told me mom died, he's like, I've never heard a noise like that come out of a human being. I hope he never has to again, you know. That was so dumbfounding. And I still think, you know, I do think on a daily basis, like, what the fuck? I do still think on a daily basis, like, I cannot believe she is gone. This is insane.
Right.
She was healthy. She was only 72. She was going out for a walk. I mean, like, she wasn't, you know,
I know.
So that aspect, so I survived it, I think, as part of it. And again, I just go back to the fact that I don't feel like they're gone. I don't think I realized. Yeah, I don't think I realized that I would feel that way.
Right.
That's a new feeling, and I don't know if it's where I am as a human, and where, you know, with the work I do and the way I live my life, that it's partially that. But my sister's pretty different from me, and I think she feels the same way. You know, so I think that's a testament to who my mom and dad were. You know, I mean, you know, again, for the 2 years that dad was sick, I would think I said to my sister so many times, if dad passed tomorrow, it's fine, because I know I've said everything I need to say. I know how he feels about me. I know how I feel about him. I know he knows how I feel about him. The same was true of my mom. I mean, there was nothing left unsaid. And so that was huge. And
that's the thing too, is just, you know, I have a lot of people emailing me saying, oh, my mom is sick. I don't know how to deal. What should I do? What are things? She's dying. What should I do? What should I do? And there are just little things, you know, because everyone has those universal thoughts of, did I say everything I needed to say? And was there anything, you know, unsaid or undone? And that's why I encourage people while they're alive to do these things. And I would say to these people, and it's so funny and delicate from my point of view, because I want to say, if you have a dying relative in the hospital, I mean, obviously this is before COVID, you know, take pictures of you holding their hands and hugging them. And even if they're not in the hospital, take pictures of you hugging your relatives, and take videos of you saying you love each other. And because after they go, those are the things that remain in your mind. Oh, did my mom know that I loved her so much? And then you're like, well, yeah, of course she did, you know, and you know, you can see pictures. I've got a picture that's being hidden right there, but of me making my mom laugh, which I love. And then if I ever, you know, get caught up in the actual death and that whole circumstance or whatever, that's what kind of gets to me. But then I have to remember, like, wait a minute, you know, I gave my mom a lot of laughter and joy, and she, you know, obviously gave the same to me. We had a beautiful, you know, reciprocity, you know.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have taken more pictures of us holding hands and, you know, enjoying each other. And so that's why I encourage people. And even when, you know, you had contacted me and let me know that your mom died and I spoke to you, you know, I was just like, please, I don't want to, you know, step on your toes, but you might want to take some pictures of your mom's house.
Oh yeah, we took a ton.
Before you go in and, you know, take stuff down off the walls and have a sale and all those things, because, you know, it's just nice to have years and years later to see, you know, where your mom lived and how she decorated, and just, I don't know. It's just one of those little things that always has stayed with me. So that's why I just tell everybody.
Yeah, no, that was a good idea. And it was funny because I didn't actually totally get to do that from a standpoint of my brother-in-law had already gone in and God bless him, like organized some things. So like we walked in, I was like, okay. But,
who moved my cheese?
Yeah, exactly. Wait, the couch doesn't go there. But we actually did have we've had a lot of pictures over the years. And, but I got to take pictures of her house out front, and as even before I left, like took just, I don't know, different pictures.
Yes.
And
I mean,
they're all on my phone.
There's so many little things, like, you know, if you ever will find yourself driving down that street or getting off on that exit off the highway, or just, you know, all of those things. It's just, it makes you catch the feelings.
It totally does.
But before I ask you a few more questions to wrap it up, I do want you to let people know where they can find you if they want to reach out.
Oh yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, so you can find me at transformationforreal.com. Right. I am working on a new website, but right now that takes you to my Facebook page. Yeah, my focus is really working with women, successful women who just have some new goals, some unfulfilled dreams, and helping them create a kick-ass life that they deserve. And you know what? That's in honor of my mom. You know, she really did. You know, she was divorced from my dad. She was a widow from my stepdad. And in her last 10 years, I mean, she lived her life till the last dang moment. And, you know, she thought she was having her and I were supposed to have a Zoom call that day. I mean, she just wasn't somebody that sat on the sidelines. I don't think she would have described herself that way. She thought of herself as pretty shy and retiring, but, you know, to watch the people come out of the woodwork, people that I didn't know, because I live in LA, she lived in Ohio. I had lived in Ohio since 97. She had created quite a following, and I don't even think she recognized.
Lovely.
And so, yeah, to be able to, I want more women to feel more than my mom was who she was. She didn't feel it. I wish I could have helped her step into her power. Yes. And she might, and I did to some extent. I mean, I always joke that she was getting free coaching, but she was getting a lot of free coaching. But if I could do that for women at this age, right? And then they teach their daughters how to do it. That's really, I mean, that's just my purpose in life.
I love that. And I believe that that's, you know, everybody's purpose is to share your light, share your love, the love that is within us, that we're born with, that's eternal, that we can still feel with our parents, that we connect with them on. It's our job on the planet is to share it with other people. And in the Good to Go departure file, the first half is all of the stuff that's not in a will, like your online bills and your bank accounts and everything. But then the second half has a lot of what I call the soul interview, or the cosmic instruction manual. And it's got some probing questions that kind of make you think about your life. And so I want to end every kind of Grievers and Groovers with asking my guests just a couple of those questions. So
that's cool.
the one, the three questions I had, okay. So what do you believe happens when we die, Lisa?
Dang, that was a deep one.
I know.
You know, I think I don't know where I sit on the idea of like a heaven. You know, I've been reading the books you've suggested to me, books other people have suggested. What feels right to me is I do think you come back. And what feels right to me is that we are the people you are with at any given experience on earth you are with in other experiences as well.
Right, right.
I might be my dad's mom next time or whatever, but
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
feel like, I do feel, and I felt this for a long time, that it's like we are all together in different time and space, just in different ways. I don't think you come back as a plant. I don't think you come back as a dog. I think you
Right.
come back as another human type person, whatever that might be. But I do feel like we all stay together in a collective group.
Cluster, soul
Yeah,
cluster.
yeah. And this idea that, it's not like my mom or dad are not happy, so they're still in this earth, right? Like that whole idea of, and I believe in this too, like there are souls that are not finished yet, right? And
Right.
so, but I think that I think my mom and dad have absolutely, they did their business here and they've moved on to whatever holding space they are supposed to be in
Yeah,
next.
yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if it's memories. I don't know if it's my own physicality or whatever it is. I don't feel lost, which I think I probably thought I would have felt lost. If
Interesting.
somebody had told me 2 years ago, that both my parents would be gone in 2020, well, dad dead in 2019, but I think I would have been like, well, what do I do? And that was
Right.
one of my first feelings. It was I think one of my biggest like gut punches was like, who's going to be proud of me now? Not that my kids and my
Yes.
husband aren't, but it's like, there's a certain thing when
It's
you go to your mom,
different.
go, I got this job or I did
Yes,
this,
yes. Just I said to my dad after my mom died, I said, "You're the only one left that loves me the most."
Right. Yep.
And he was just like, "What are you talking about?" And I was just like, "Well, mom's dead and, she loves me the most. And then you're the other one that loves me the most,
Yeah.
And he just couldn't quite put two and two together. He didn't think of it that way. But, obviously with people who've lost their parents, it's not just you miss them, you miss yourself and who you were to them.
Yes.
That's gone, so
Yeah.
it's really hard. And even though our parents love us and are proud of us, you miss that physical validation. And it's
100%.
it's hard not to pick up the phone to share good news and to, hey, and I remember just watching a sunset, and this was only like 6 months ago, and I thought, oh man, I can't wait to call mom and let her know that I just saw this beautiful pink sunset. And I was just like, oh wait, she's been dead for 8 years. What?
Wow.
It's kind of like your brain is so trained to have them in your life. And and think about it. We were lucky enough to have our parents well into our, late 40s. And that's more than a lot of people get, so we were very, very lucky. But yeah, oh gosh, it's so weird and funny. But okay, so the big last cosmic question that's asked in the Good to Go departure file is, how would you like to be remembered, Lisa?
You know what? I want to be remembered kind of the way I've thought of now, which is that I'm just no bullshit. I used to think of it as selfish, and the reality of it is I'm just who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I take care of myself and I take care of you, and I'm not going to tell you something just to make you feel good. If I tell you I like something that you've done, I'm not bullshitting. Like, I like it.
Right.
And if I don't like it, I will either keep my mouth shut or not tell you, or it's literally why my company is Transformation for Real, because that's what the feedback I have always gotten from my clients is, I trust you because you're authentic. You don't tell me
Right.
anything I don't, it's not tough love. It's just like no bullshit.
Well,
So,
being your authentic self it's the goal, isn't it? It's the job of all of all people, is just to be yourself. Joseph Campbell said the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. And I think as women, especially as we age, we just become more of ourselves.
totally.
And we give less shits about what other people think, and we can feel good within ourselves and who our parents made us to be. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your experiences and for using your love and your power for good instead of evil, and for elevating people, and just for helping other people who are watching this, who are grieving and don't know how they're going to get through. I think, what you talked about, I think is going to be really helpful. So I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you. And this is God, I just wish I could scream it from the rooftops, because I just think good to go is beyond necessary. And you just come at it with such love that it just, yeah, it's talk about, I mean, I always thought your purpose in life was to, you know, like marry Paul McCartney or something. But
I know, me too. I was the rock and roll girl. I never thought I was going to be
you still are, though. You still are.
the planning for death girl. Yes, we can be both. We can be many things, Lisa. All right. Well, check out Lisa and transformationforreal.com. And thank you again for you know, being on the show. And I really appreciate you. Take care.
You're so welcome.
Okay. Now I'm going to stop recording.